March 27, 2000, 11:43 p.m. Shrine Auditorium, Los Angeles. The applause hasn't stopped. Flashbulbs crackle like static in a storm. A gold statue is pressed into a trembling hand. Cameras push closer. Producers lean forward in their seats. Agents whisper numbers into phones before the winner even reaches the wings. On stage, the smile is steady, grateful, polished. Backstage, everything changes. Assistants circle like air traffic controllers. 3 scripts already. 2 studio heads want breakfast tomorrow. Your quote just doubled. Champagne glasses collide in celebration. The words bankable, prestige, franchise potential are repeated like a chant. You can almost feel the pressure shifting in the room, invisible, immediate. Winning an Oscar is supposed to be ignition, acceleration, the final confirmation that Hollywood now bends toward you. But sometimes, the night you win is the night the system quietly tightens its grip. Because what no one says, not in the speeches, not in the interviews, is that an Oscar doesn't just validate talent. It defines it. And once you are defined, the industry begins building walls around that definition. In the months that follow, the offers flood in: historical dramas, biopics, serious roles, scripts heavy with trauma and moral conflict, each one framed as another awards play, each one carefully engineered to preserve the image that just won gold. The subtext is subtle but unmistakable: don't risk it. Studios don't want experimentation, they want replication, the same emotional register, the same prestige formula, the same narrative arc that worked before. Because now there's more at stake. Budgets get larger, insurance clauses tighten, marketing departments start shaping identity before production even begins. The actor is no longer just an artist, they are an investment portfolio with a golden seal of approval. And portfolios are not built for volatility. Psychologically, this is where something shifts. Before the award, there is hunger, risk, the willingness to disappear into strange characters, indie films, untested directors. After the award, there is scrutiny. Every choice is examined for consistency. Every role becomes a referendum on whether the win was deserved. The expectation isn't to grow. It's to protect. And protection changes behavior. Some actors lean in. They stack prestige projects back-to-back, hoping to cement their place in the hierarchy. Others chase scale, blockbuster roles that convert artistic credibility into financial dominance. But a few hesitate. Because they feel something others don't talk about: exhaustion. The award season campaign alone can stretch for months: screenings, Q&As, private dinners, interviews crafted to sound spontaneous. By the time the statue is in hand, the performer has been publicly consumed for nearly a year. And now the industry wants more. Immediately. But here's the paradox: visibility creates vulnerability. The more visible you are, the less control you often have. Schedules fill, narratives form. Oscar winner becomes a prefix that overshadows the name itself. And when every decision feels amplified, stepping back begins to look less like retreat and more like strategy. There have been moments, rarely discussed openly, when major figures in Hollywood, right after achieving the pinnacle, quietly slowed down. Not because the offers stopped. Because they didn't. But because continuing at full speed meant surrendering authorship over their own careers. This is where the myth of momentum begins to crack. Awards don't automatically grant power. In many cases, they create a new dependency on maintaining reputation, on pleasing studios, on staying culturally central. And sometimes the most radical move in a system addicted to constant output is silence. The phones are still ringing, the scripts are still arriving. But imagine choosing not to answer. Imagine telling an industry built on urgency, wait. That's not weakness. That's leverage in disguise. And for some of Hollywood's most celebrated figures, that decision, that pause, quietly reshaped the balance of power in ways no acceptance speech ever could. Because when the spotlight dims by choice, something unexpected happens. Hollywood starts adjusting. The first script arrives 72 hours later. A couriered envelope, heavy paper, a studio watermark in the corner. The cover letter is enthusiastic, tailor-made, award follow-up, guaranteed prestige. The numbers are staggering: 8 figures, back-end points, a director who just premiered at Cannes. On paper it's perfect. But something feels off. Because it's the same role. Not literally, different name, different setting, but emotionally identical. The same tortured genius, the same quiet suffering, the same third-act monologue designed for awards clips. This is the part no one prepares you for. After an Oscar win, the industry doesn't ask who you want to become. It asks you to repeat who you just were. And repetition is safe for studios, predictable, marketable. It reassures investors that lightning can strike twice. But for the performer, repetition can feel like erosion. You can almost imagine the internal dialogue: if I say yes, I solidify the brand. If I say no, I risk disappearing. This is the psychological trap of validation. Before the award, risk builds identity. After the award, risk threatens it. Take the pattern we've seen across decades. Actors who win young often find their creative options narrowing. Casting directors subconsciously elevate them into a category: serious, prestige, untouchable. Comedy scripts stop arriving. Genre films feel beneath the narrative that's been constructed around them. They become symbols. And symbols are difficult to evolve. The irony is brutal. The award meant to celebrate versatility can quietly reduce it. Studios recalibrate instantly. Agents renegotiate contracts with new leverage. Publicists tighten messaging. Interviews are filtered through a new lens. Every answer must reflect gravitas. Growth becomes a branding exercise rather than an artistic instinct. But internally, the performer may feel the opposite of powerful. Because power in Hollywood isn't just about money or acclaim. It's about choice. And after a massive win, choice can paradoxically shrink. Every yes reinforces the industry's expectations. Every no invites speculation. Headlines start forming narratives before any decision is finalized. Can they follow it up? Pressure mounts after big win. Pressure is subtle, but it's constant. You see it in the development slate. Studios move faster. They want the next project announced within months, ideally before awards season fades from memory. Momentum must be maintained. Cultural presence must be uninterrupted. But what if momentum isn't the goal? What if sustainability is? This is where the career pause begins to form, not publicly, not dramatically, but privately. A conversation with a manager, a late-night reflection, the quiet admission: I don't want to be everywhere right now. And that's radical in an industry addicted to visibility. Because Hollywood operates on cycles of relevance, if you're not on screen, you risk being replaced. The system assumes absence equals decline. But that assumption overlooks something critical. Scarcity creates value. When an actor steps back intentionally, something fascinating happens. The narrative machine stalls, speculation grows, studios grow impatient and then curious. Why aren't they signing anything? Why did they pass on that franchise? Is it strategy? Is it burnout? The pause becomes its own form of presence. Historically, some of the most respected figures in film have understood this instinctively. After peak visibility, they retreated, not in scandal, not in failure, in silence. They directed instead of starring, they produced quietly, they disappeared from red carpets. Years would pass between major roles. At first, executives worry, momentum fades, new stars emerge. But then something shifts. When they return, selectively, deliberately, the weight of their absence amplifies impact. The audience hasn't grown tired of them. There's no overexposure to dilute intrigue. And suddenly they're not just actors. They're events. That transformation from participant to event is a form of power that constant visibility rarely achieves. Psychologically, it requires restraint, the discipline to resist immediate validation, the confidence to endure speculation, the tolerance for headlines that question relevance. That's not easy. Especially when the entire ecosystem around you, agents, studios, even fans, equates busyness with success. But here, the hidden industry truth: Hollywood fears unpredictability. And when a newly crowned Oscar winner refuses to follow the expected trajectory, the balance shifts. Because if the system can't predict you, it can't control you. The scripts keep coming. The offers grow larger. But the real negotiation isn't about salary. It's about time. And choosing not to move when everyone expects you to, that's where the quiet redefinition begins. The question isn't whether the career will survive the pause. It's whether the pause will transform it into something far more durable. And in some cases, that transformation changes not just one career, but the way Hollywood calculates power itself. 6 months after the ceremony, the calls start to change. They're no longer celebratory, they're strategic. Studio executives begin asking a different question: what do they want? Not what can we offer, not how do we replicate the win. What do they want? That shift is subtle, almost invisible from the outside, but inside the machinery of Hollywood it signals something significant. Because when a major award winner doesn't immediately attach themselves to the next prestige vehicle, the usual forecasting models collapse. Release calendars can't rely on their name. Award strategists can't pre-build campaigns. Marketing departments can't anchor their Q4 plans around a guaranteed contender. Uncertainty creeps in. And uncertainty in Hollywood creates negotiation space. You can picture the private meetings, glass conference rooms overlooking Sunset Boulevard, executives scrolling through development slates. We need something elevated. We need credibility. We need someone who doesn't feel overexposed. Suddenly, the very absence that once felt risky becomes rare currency. This is the moment the power dynamic tilts. Instead of being one of many projects in motion, the Oscar winner who paused becomes a variable studios can't easily replace. The market is saturated with talent but not with mystique. And mystique grows in silence. Psychologically, this stage requires something counterintuitive: comfort with irrelevance. Because for a period of time, headlines will slow, social media chatter will shift to newer faces, red carpets will proceed without them. The industry machine will attempt to continue as if nothing changed. But underneath, recalibration is happening. Agents start negotiating differently. Instead of pitching the actor for roles, they begin fielding offers structured around creative control, producer credits, script approval, back-end participation. The conversation moves from hire me to partner with me. That language shift is everything. Before the pause, the Oscar validated talent. After the pause, it validates discernment. Studios begin assuming that if this person chooses a project, it must mean something. Scarcity turns choice into endorsement. A single attachment can trigger financing. International presales spike, directors suddenly return calls faster. The absence reframes presence. There's also a deeper psychological evolution taking place. During the hypervisibility of awards season, identity can blur. Interviews become rehearsed narratives, publicists craft cohesion. The performer becomes a public symbol of excellence, polished and digestible. But in stepping back, something recenters. Without constant promotion cycles, the artist regains privacy. Without immediate production schedules, they can develop projects slowly, read scripts without urgency, explore genres without the shadow of follow-up expectations. It's in this slower space that long-term strategy forms. Some pivot toward producing, controlling development pipelines from the beginning. Others choose roles in unexpected genres, thrillers, dark comedies, even television, deliberately disrupting the prestige-only label attached to them. And because they are no longer everywhere, the risk of experimentation decreases. Overexposure punishes risk, scarcity rewards it. You see it historically. Actors who disappeared for 3 years return in a project no one predicted, and it lands harder than if they had remained in constant rotation. The industry's fear of absence begins transforming into respect for it. There's another layer most viewers never see: financial insulation. After a major win, compensation typically rises dramatically. 1 or 2 high-value deals can create stability that allows strategic patience. That economic cushion makes it possible to say no, a privilege not every actor has. And saying no repeatedly, publicly reshapes perception. They're not chasing relevance. They're curating it. In Hollywood, where speed often masquerades as success, slowing down becomes a differentiator. But this is also the most fragile stage. Because if the pause extends too long without intention, the system can move on, audiences evolve, trends shift, cultural tastes change. The line between strategic absence and fading relevance is razor thin. And navigating that line requires extraordinary awareness, not just of self but of timing. So the turning point isn't the pause itself. It's the return. And when that return is orchestrated deliberately, attached to a project with weight, with surprise, with creative authority, something remarkable happens. The narrative changes from can they sustain momentum to they move when they choose to. That distinction is the quiet redefinition of power. It's not about being everywhere. It's about being undeniable when you decide to appear. And once Hollywood understands that you are not dependent on its calendar, the negotiations feel different. Because the system may control the spotlight, but it cannot force someone to step into it. 3 years later. No red carpets, no franchise cameos, no surprise streaming deals. And then a headline. Not a leak, not a rumor. An announcement. Attached not just as lead actor, but as producer. The project isn't obvious, it isn't engineered for awards season, it isn't a historical epic soaked in prestige, it's unexpected, intimate, risky in a way the industry wouldn't have predicted on Oscar night. And that's the point. Because now the return isn't reactive. It's authored. When someone pauses long enough, the comeback stops being about visibility, it becomes about intention. Studios approach differently, press coverage shifts tone. Instead of asking, how do you top the Oscar win? Journalists ask, why this story? That subtle change signals something powerful. The narrative is no longer about pressure. It's about purpose. You can almost feel the difference in the premiere atmosphere. There's less frenzy, more curiosity. Audiences lean in. They haven't been saturated with interviews. They haven't seen the face in 5 different campaigns that year. Absence has restored dimension. And industry executives notice something else: leverage. Producer credit isn't symbolic. It means involvement in script development, casting decisions, post-production. It means ownership. It means back-end percentages instead of flat salaries. It means participating in long-term profit rather than short-term applause. That's power most Oscar winners don't automatically receive. They earn it through restraint. Hollywood is built on urgency, projects move fast, slates fill quickly, decisions are often driven by quarterly projections rather than creative patience. So when someone refuses to operate on urgency, the system has to adapt. An adaptation in Hollywood often looks like accommodation. Suddenly, studios are willing to wait for availability, willing to reshape schedules, willing to greenlight smaller projects because the attachment carries weight. Not because the award demands it. Because the discipline did. Psychologically, something else transforms during the pause and return cycle. The fear of losing relevance fades. When you've stepped back voluntarily and come back on your own terms, the industry's grip loosens. There's less desperation in the decision-making, fewer choices made out of anxiety. The relationship with fame changes. Before, visibility was currency. After, visibility becomes a tool. Used sparingly, strategically. And that recalibration doesn't just affect one career, it influences peers. Younger actors notice. They observe that non-stop output isn't the only model, that stepping away after a peak moment doesn't automatically mean decline. It can mean consolidation. There's a deeper industry implication here. Hollywood thrives on availability. When talent is always accessible, negotiations tilt toward studios. When talent is selective, even scarce, leverage shifts. It's basic supply and demand, but layered with psychology. Audiences crave what feels intentional. They sense when an appearance matters. They respond to rarity. That response feeds box office performance, streaming metrics, award conversations. The return becomes an event, not because of marketing saturation, but because of anticipation. And anticipation is built in silence. Look closely at the careers that endured for decades. Many of them include deliberate gaps, unexplained absences, strategic pivots into directing or producing, long development periods between major roles. Not stagnation. Calibration. The Oscar, in hindsight, becomes less of a launching pad and more of a crossroads. It amplifies choices, but it doesn't determine them. What determines trajectory is how the winner responds to the industry's immediate expectations. Say yes to everything, and momentum can blur into overexposure. Say no selectively, and momentum can mature into influence. And influence lasts longer than buzz. By the time the paused actor stands on another stage, whether at a premiere, a festival, or even a second awards ceremony, the perception has changed. They're not just a performer riding a wave. They're a figure who shapes the wave. And that's a different category of power entirely. But here's the deeper question lingering beneath it all. If control comes from absence, why does Hollywood still push constant presence? Because control is harder to negotiate when someone knows they don't need the spotlight to survive. And that understanding may be the most transformative win of all. There's a quiet moment that rarely makes headlines. It happens long after the return. A development executive sits in a screening room, the film finishes, the lights come up slowly, no one speaks for a few seconds. Not because it's explosive. Because it feels controlled. Intentional. And in that silence, something becomes clear. The actor who once seemed defined by an Oscar win is no longer orbiting the industry. The industry is orbiting them. This is the final shift, the one that doesn't trend on social media. When a major Hollywood figure proves they can step away at the height of visibility and return without desperation, it forces studios to rethink assumptions. Availability is no longer a guarantee. And that changes deal-making at the highest levels. Instead of building projects first and attaching talent later, studios begin developing around specific individuals. Schedules are shaped around their timelines. Scripts are rewritten to align with their vision. International distributors commit earlier because the name carries curated weight. Not saturation. Curated weight. There's an economic psychology at play here. When someone appears in 5 films in 3 years, their presence becomes normalized. When they appear once every 3 years deliberately, their involvement signals filtration. If they chose this, it must matter. That perception influences audience behavior. Opening weekend numbers often reflect anticipation built over absence. Press coverage shifts from routine promotion to analytical curiosity. Critics examine the choices more deeply. Scarcity enhances seriousness. But the most significant transformation isn't financial. It's psychological. For the individual. Because after proving they can pause and survive, fear diminishes. The invisible clock that Hollywood installs, the one ticking loudly after awards wins, loses its authority. They no longer feel obligated to respond instantly to opportunity. They can evaluate it. That freedom redefines creative risk. Suddenly, taking a smaller project isn't career suicide. Choosing an unconventional director isn't reckless. Exploring television, streaming, theater, or even stepping behind the camera becomes evolution rather than retreat. The Oscar, once perceived as a peak to defend, becomes simply a chapter. And here's the industry irony. The pause that once worried executives ultimately increases long-term profitability. Because sustained mystique generates sustained demand. The actor who resists constant output often lasts longer than the one who capitalizes immediately on every wave. We've seen careers ignite brilliantly after awards and fade within 5 years under the weight of expectation and overexposure. We've also seen careers stretch across decades, punctuated by deliberate silence. The difference isn't talent. It's packing. Hollywood power isn't measured by how fast you move after validation. It's measured by how confidently you can stand still. And that realization quietly reshapes the ecosystem. Younger performers begin negotiating differently. Representatives begin advising patience instead of saturation. Studios begin factoring in long-term alignment rather than short-term momentum. The culture adjusts slowly, almost reluctantly, to the idea that visibility isn't the only metric of influence. There's a deeper emotional layer to this story. Restraint. In an environment that rewards constant output, choosing absence requires internal stability. It demands self-trust. It means tolerating silence when applause once came daily. You have to believe your value doesn't evaporate when you're not trending. That belief is rare. And that rarity is precisely why it becomes powerful. By the time the actor stands years later, maybe at another ceremony, maybe accepting a producing award, maybe introducing a new filmmaker whose project they championed, the transformation is complete. They're no longer reacting to Hollywood's expectations. Hollywood reacts to theirs. The golden statue didn't freeze their evolution. The pause unlocked it. Because sometimes the most influential move in a system obsessed with constant presence is to make it wait.